There are teams in the NBA who have a clearly defined direction. Some are doing everything they can to contend and compete for a title now by stacking as much talent as they possibly can. And then there are those who are building for the future, developing young players and accumulating draft capital to work with for the foreseeable future. And then there are those few teams that are kind of sitting in no man's land, with seemingly no direction or path forward, living in basketball purgatory. Teams where none of us can quite seem to figure out what they're doing. Teams that appear to be living in a fantasy world when it comes to assessing the state of their team and the value of their current players and assets that they have at their disposal. And while yes, I realize this is rich coming from a Bulls fan whose team is the definition of mid with little direction for the future to getting to contending status, but I've gone in and been critical of my team on my Bulls channel. While I certainly think there is much to critique of a team like the Bulls or even the Atlanta Hawks, I do feel there is one team that is in an even worse state and so incompetently run, and their actions and decisions are somehow flying under the radar with little attention and focus. And yes, I'm talking about the Brooklyn Nets, a team that seems to have no clue what their ultimate goal is for this roster, both for now and for the future. Just how bad is it? Well, let's dive into it further. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, GameTime. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure of going to a game in person, it's truly one of the best experiences you'll ever have as a fan. But sometimes the experience of buying tickets isn't always the best. Are you getting a good deal? Are you not getting a good deal? Are the tickets legitimate? How do you know you're not being scammed? Well, with GameTime, they take out the guesswork when it comes to buying tickets. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. I actually used GameTime the other day to go to a comedy show here in the Bay Area and got a killer deal on the tickets right at the front of the stage for a date night for me and my wife. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It really is the best place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets. With zone deals, you can pick a section where you want to sit, and GameTime will pick the seats for you for big-time savings. And the GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price, even if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. So again, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code AND1 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code AND1 for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, everyone knows the background and recent history of the Brooklyn Nets. They went from a team that a little over a decade ago tried to make a big splash to finally be relevant and start trying to contend for a championship by mortgaging their entire future by bringing in big names, players that were past their primes, in Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. That was to pair alongside Deron Williams, who at the time was one of the better point guards in the NBA. They brought in Brook Lopez, Joe Johnson, and they looked like a very well-balanced, well-constructed team with veteran leadership and young talent and depth off the bench. But they ended up never really making any noise, never getting past the second round. In fact, they only ended up winning one playoff series together. And they quickly aborted that experiment to become one of the worst teams in the NBA, while the Boston Celtics, the team they traded most of their draft capital to, unprotected picks I might add, started thriving, taking advantage of the Nets' quick downfall and securing their high lottery picks, which turned into Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And of course, we all know the history of the Nets. After being irrelevant and a bottom feeder in the Eastern Conference for so many years, decided to take another crack at accelerating their timeline to win now, despite the fact that they had actually started developing young talent in guys like Jared Allen, D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert. They decided to make a huge splash and assemble one of the greatest super teams in NBA history by signing and trading for Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then later on down the line in trading for James Harden. A team that had multiple championship level aspirations, dynasty aspirations, all but to end up becoming one of the biggest disappointments in sports history, having won just one playoff series together, suffering multiple injuries between the big three, league suspensions to Kyrie Irving, James Harden being unhappy and demanding a trade, to later on down the line to Durant demanding a trade and retracting said demand, then Kyrie Irving demanding a trade, then Kevin Durant wanting back on the trade demand market once he realized he would be the only man left standing. Multiple picks, young players, money, all down the drain in just a couple of quick seasons with one playoff series win to show for it. But here's the thing. While everyone likes to clown the Nets for botching one of the greatest super teams ever assembled, it wasn't all that bad, because unlike a lot of teams who would have somehow tried to make things work with their star players and overpay to keep them around, the Nets actually did the smart thing and got out while they could, realizing things were not going to work with this group, and capitalize on the value of their superstars while they still had it. For a team that had lost so much of their future by mortgaging it all on these players, they gained back as much as they possibly could for their aging veteran stars. Like really, when you consider the return the Nets got back from the big three, despite having little leverage in each trade because teams knew those guys wanted out, it's actually quite impressive. James Harden demanded a trade. Didn't want to be there anymore. His trade value was very low at the time as he wasn't playing well and was up for a big contract extension. And somehow they managed to get 2 first-round picks in the deal, along with Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and Ben Simmons. Now, taking on Simmons' contract in and of itself was a mistake, but they needed to include him in the deal to make the money work. And at that time, even though Simmons was coming off that bad end-of-season playoff series against the Atlanta Hawks, the thought at the time was this guy just needed to change his scene. He's still young, still one of the best defenders in the game of basketball, and a great point guard. Then for Kyrie Irving, a man who refused to get the COVID vaccine, which resulted in him missing nearly a full season, a man who was a PR nightmare for them with everything that happened between his political views, the Holocaust film controversy, being in and out of the lineup, between injuries, suspensions, and also never seeming to fully have his heart into the game. And for a player on an expiring contract, wanting a max deal, going into his 30s, the man's trade value was at its absolute lowest. They ended up getting an unprotected first-round pick out of him from the Dallas Mavericks, in addition to a second-round pick, Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, both solid rotational pieces and even players they could flip in a trade in the near future to continue on their rebuild. And then Kevin Durant, obviously a superstar talent, one of the greatest scorers in the history of the NBA. It was expected they would get a haul for him in return. But given KD's age, at the time of the trade, his contract, and his injury history, it was not expected that they would net 4 first-round picks, 1 pick swap, and an up-and-coming talent and star in the making in Mikal Bridges, as well as a solid young role player in Cam Johnson, for then 34-year-old player on a max contract. All in all, the Nets were able to take their failed big three and turn it into 7 first-round picks: Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie, Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, and Ben Simmons. By most standards, one would consider that to be a good haul and a start to a rebuild for a team that for the second time in a decade tried to hit the accelerator button prematurely and it backfired. Here's the problem though. The Nets still haven't learned from their previous mistakes. After losing all the draft capital in the James Harden trade and regaining trade assets back despite not being able to control their own picks while those go to the Rockets, the Nets front office has completely lost track of reality, and not only overvaluing their players, but also in failing to recognize the obvious, that their objective should be acquiring as much draft capital and young talent as possible for a timeline that is 5+ years out. See, while having all of those first-round picks they acquired and trading for the big three is good, they don't have control over said picks. The picks that they do have control over, their own picks, are owed to the Houston Rockets and other teams for the foreseeable future. The next first-round picks the Nets fully own, not a pick swap or owed to another team, is in 2029. So while some will say the Nets should just tank for a couple of seasons, that doesn't really benefit them, considering they'll be sending higher lottery picks to another team like they did years ago and sending top 3 picks to the Boston Celtics. So when you can't control your own picks for the next 5 years, and you're not a free agency destination given the current state and history of your team, what do? You improve your team via trades. Now for the Brooklyn Nets, the biggest player they acquired in all the deals for trading for the big three was Mikal Bridges. Great two-way player, fringe-level all-star. He likely would have been selected as an all-star had it not been for the Nets' collapse after a good start to the season. And I love Mikal Bridges, love his game. I think he's a fine player that can fit on any team, and he's on a pretty team-friendly contract for the next 3 seasons. But according to reports, again, just reports, the Brooklyn Nets, since acquiring Mikal Bridges, have rejected multiple offers from teams who have been willing to give up multiple first-round picks to get Bridges in a deal. You've had 2 such incidents being reported. The Nets rejected offers of 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. Again, I like Bridges, but he's not worth 4 first-round picks. And if there is a team willing to trade that kind of draft capital for him, you jump all over that and never look back. Because even as good as Bridges is, you have to ask yourself, is he a player that you can build around? Is he going to be that guy, a 1A or 1B option on a contending team? Does he fit your overall timeline? And if the answer is no, why waste his prime and not capitalize when his trade value is this high? Mikal Bridges is 27. It's not like this is an instance where you have a 22, 23-year-old player who still has a lot of upside and years to work with and building a roster around. And look, it would be one thing if the Nets were, say, a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference right now, and they were making strides in the right direction or showing signs of contention. Then sure, you keep Bridges and keep adding talent. But the Nets are lottery bound. They're most likely not going to make the play-in at this point. They started out the season decently well, but have since fallen 13 games below 500 and have been non-competitive in a lot of those games. And yet they're clinging on to these players who are in their primes and have value around the league and trade deals. Dorian Finney-Smith, there was interest in him from a lot of teams around the association at the trade deadline. The Nets passed up on deals to move him at the deadline because they wanted a first-round pick in exchange for him minimum. They made one of the most pointless trades at the deadline in sending Dinwiddie to the Raptors for Dennis Schroeder, a straight lateral move with no benefit. They handed Cam Johnson a massive contract extension, which was way overpaid relative to his kind of production that he brings and the impact he has on the court when he's making over $25 million per year. Again, another player who shouldn't be on their timeline of a rebuild if that's what they're going for. They're probably not going to be able to move off of Ben Simmons' contract, so they're just going to have to eat that until it expires. They've got some good young players, but they haven't really been able to develop them. Again, what is the goal of this roster? What is the ultimate direction? What are they trying to achieve? You're a lottery team with not a lot of upside, and you're unwilling to trade some of your best players and overvaluing them on the trade market. Instead, you fire your coach as if that's going to solve the problem. No, the problem is at the top. The front office, ownership. They have no clue how to run a franchise. Too many times have they tried to fast track creating a relevant team, and it's backfired on them. And then, when they have a real shot to try and build for the future, they don't know how to execute upon it. So now the Nets have their lottery pick this year going to the Houston Rockets, and they'll keep hanging on to some of their best players who will get older and older and let their trade value go down even further when they had the opportunity to jump on massive offers around the league. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think is the future of the Brooklyn Nets, this Brooklyn Nets team? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.